Hephaestus by Anton Eine. A hellishly hot shower helped to bring me to my senses, at least a little bit, after that sleepless night. A good, hearty breakfast and a hot cup of coffee would be just the thing now. Indeed, a bucket of coffee wouldn't have gone amiss. I quickly dried myself off, shuddering slightly when the towel cloth caught the edge of a fresh cut. I wiped part of the fogged-over mirror clean, and with one hand examined my shoulder. The bite marks had already turned to dark, reddish-black bruises. Oh no, I wasn't complaining. The girl had undeniably been worth it. I'd met her the evening before, in the bar of my hotel in Bangkok. We had a few drinks, talked about this and that. You know, the usual. But then we went up to my room and had a long, crazy, wild night. Right now, though, I could think of nothing but coffee. And meat. And bread. Ah yes, bread too. And maybe some cheese. And then another coffee, black, hot, no sugar, deliberately savoring the thick, tart bitterness, feeling the caffeine restore my strength and switch my brain back on. A brain sluggish and dense from the lack of sleep, and the blood began to flow faster through my veins. Reflexively wrapping the towel around my waist, I came out of the bathroom, but then I decided that, after that madcap night, there was nothing really left to be shy about. So, I dropped the niceties and came out rubbing my head with the towel. It was a good thing I didn't need a blow-dryer with my hair cropped this short. So, you ready to go down and get some breakfast and recharge our batteries? I asked my new acquaintance, peeking out from under the towel directly into the barrel of a gun. My gun, I should mention, which meant that, while I had been showering, she had broken into my suitcase. Which meant that she had managed to get around the fingerprint scanner that controlled the lock, which meant that there was much more to this girl than met the eye, and that she worked for someone of import.
Surprise,
she said, with a cold smile, sitting on the edge of the insane mess we had made of the bed. Yes, I said, nodding cautiously, my arm still poised in the air, holding the towel over my head. I might have guessed. It had all gone too easily yesterday, too smoothly. On the other hand, she didn't pick me up at the bar. I did that. And a vulgar platinum blonde in a trampish dress wasn't my usual taste at all. The logical conclusion would be that it wasn't a setup. Right. Still, she had obviously been set as bait. And I'd been successfully hooked. Correction, caught. With my pants down. Listen. If you want money, I don't have too much on me, but I can get more. We can make a deal.
Hands where they are,
Snapped the blonde, preventing me from lowering my arms and extending my hands in a gesture of peace.
Quit playing the innocent, Carl, and no sudden movements.
I nodded cautiously again, trying to imagine who might have sent her.
Twitch and I'll blow your brains out. Cry out and I'll blow your brains out.
Curious, I mused pensively. Last night you did so much of the screaming. This is such a completely different take on loud noises. If I'd hoped to confuse Abby, it wasn't working. Abby wasn't her real name, of course.
The situation's changed, Carl,
Said not Abby, impassive, with a faint shrug of the shoulders. The gun pointed at my chest didn't waver so much as an inch. About 8 feet. Too far to jump her and knock the gun out of her hand. In the time it took me, she'd shoot me 2 or 3 times. And something told me she wouldn't miss. You know, I'm a little uncomfortable standing here like this in front of you, naked. And I hinted downward with my eyes to distract her for a fragment of a second, at least give her something else to follow. Can I at least get dressed?
No, you were so beyond naked last night, now suddenly you're bashful.
I forced a bitter smirk, although the smirk was pretty much in earnest at the same time. I shifted my weight, and with it my footing, getting myself an inch or two closer, concealing the almost imperceptible movements of my feet in the soft hotel slippers, 1 inch at a time. A moment's pause, then slowly shift your body's weight onto that foot. The situation, Abby, as you say, has changed. Last night you didn't have that thing pointed at me. I nodded at the gun, hoping she would respond to the joke and say something about how I had aimed something else of mine at her. I'd laugh and end up another inch closer to her. But no, bedroom jokes weren't going to distract her now. She ignored the attempt, and the hand on the gun still didn't falter, and the cold eyes remained unwaveringly fixed upon me, sensitive to the slightest hint of danger my body language might betray. All right, so that's how it is. I shrugged, as much as one can shrug with one's hands over one's head. For a weapon I had only a damp towel, a large bath towel. It wouldn't protect me from a bullet. It might serve to distract her attention for a fraction of a second if I threw it in her face. I could use that fraction of a second to heave myself out of her line of fire, but I'd still be hit by at least a couple of bullets. Right, say what you will, but it wasn't the most elegant outcome. So, what do you want, Abby? Is it really Abby, by the way? Doesn't matter, I suppose. What do you want?
The access codes to the Hephaestus project system. All the data. Now.
Excuse me? What on earth are you talking about? The girl's eyes narrowed. She was like a predator before the pounce.
Oh, Carl. I wouldn't try those games with me. We're both professionals. You've lost. I've won. It's pretty simple, isn't it? Why show such disrespect by playing the fool? We both know it isn't going to work.
Work? Who do you work for, by the way?
Weak. The codes, Carl.
I thought there was something American about her, but that didn't mean she was CIA. She could just as well be MI6 or Mossad. She could be working for the Russians or the Chinese or any of a handful of Middle Eastern countries. Or she could be with a private contractor, or her own private client directly. That might be the likeliest scenario. Fine. She certainly knew who I was, and obviously enough, she knew that I was in charge of security for the Hephaestus project. I did, in fact, have access to the system. She had been in the bar yesterday, in the hotel lobby, for the sake of that access. She had waited for me to notice and approach her. An intricate game, planned many steps ahead so that everything would seem natural, innocuous. And I had to admit that it had worked. You know it doesn't work that way, right? I don't have access to all the system data.
Of course you don't.
A weary note entered her crystal-sharp voice, mixed with a resignation to the rules of the game.
What you have is priority access to the security systems, and that enables you to give yourself access to any data you do not have access to immediately. Stop stalling, Carl.
She was right. I was stalling. Time might not be on my side, but it wasn't working in her favor either. And that suited me fine. It also gave me a brief interval to think things through. The Hephaestus project was a complex strategic techno-startup. It had been founded by a group of scientists whose goal was a breakthrough in geoenergy, to access the boundless heat within the planet, to satisfy all mankind's needs with practically unlimited free energy. This was nothing like our current sorry attempts to tap subterranean geothermal energy or hot springs. It meant direct access to the limitless, sustainable energy of the Earth's core. That was not going to be a simple matter, Their calculations showed it would take decades to complete. But given the vast pool of top-flight brains, plus the enormous financing provided by a number of billionaire philanthropists, it had every likelihood of success, which indisputably made it public enemy number one for the entire existing energy industry. Oil and gas would cease to be fuel and lose much of their value. They would become nothing more than a common raw material for chemical production. The world's transportation system would change radically. The political balance of power would shift as well. And too many people would lose vast amounts of power, money, and influence. Energy corporations, the automobile industry, and the governments of numerous countries had a serious chance of being left on the sidelines. The U.S. had expressed a serious interest in the project and had attempted to worm its way into the initiative to obtain vital information about it, because America's power over the world economy was based largely on its control of the international flow of oil. But something in Abby's methods suggested that whoever it was she reported to, it wasn't Langley. Hephaestus was a sword of Damocles hanging over the head of the Russian Federation, ready to sever its only significant source of wealth and influence, to bankrupt and possibly eradicate its ancient empire. And they had already undertaken a series of undisguised attempts to derail the study and steal the project data. But the Russian hackers had failed in their attempts to penetrate our advanced security systems. Yes, it was possible that my nocturnal guest was working for the Kremlin. The sheikhs, whose wealth derived exclusively from the pumping of oil, were divided into two groups: those who aggressively, malevolently opposed the startup, and those who blithely ignored it. Of course, there were the numerous Islamic terrorist groups financed by Middle Eastern governments, for which the lame god had now become an enemy of Allah. Their methods were primitive and below the belt, but we had handled them. For much the same reasons, Hephaestus was of interest to Israel, which saw in it a major opportunity to promote the downfall of a series of hostile neighboring regimes, although it was also concerned about the dangers associated with their sudden impoverishment. It was generally more an ally than an enemy. From time to time it would share information about various conspiracies or terrorist plans that had come to its attention, but at the same time it took every opportunity to dig deeper into our affairs. It was unlikely that Abby was associated with Mossad. The Chinese? Hard to say what the project's success would mean to them, a boon or a disaster. But they were always trying to buy or steal information, or even the entire startup. If it was going to change the world, they wanted to have their hands on it and control the new energy. Could Beijing resort to such radical measures? It could, there was no doubt. But they seldom employed freelancers. They prefer their own agents. Still, it couldn't be ruled out. There were a whole host of possibilities, but I was certain I was right in my guess as to who her employer actually was. Abby. You should know things are never that simple. If I attempt to alter my own access rights, the system registers an alarm. It will require identification, authorization, and confirmation of access rights. One of my employees has to decide whether I am acting under duress, in which case they will cut off my access entirely.
You'll manage, Carl. Or I'll kill you. It really is that simple. Enter the word that sets off the alarm and I shoot you dead. Send your employees any signal of any kind and I shoot you dead. If you don't manage to get full access and transfer it to me.
Yes, you'll shoot me dead, I said, smiling brightly, turning my palms out slightly and subtly moving an inch closer while the girl was assessing the movement of my hands. 7 feet, progress, slow and steady, no hurry. Soon she would notice the decrease in distance. Then I'd either have to act immediately or back off and lose the opportunity I had so patiently created. Her mistake was not an obvious one. It seemed everything had been properly thought through and planned, but she had failed to account for the simple possibility that I might not care whether she shot me or not. I had been appointed head of security for Hephaestus a little over 3 years earlier, when the project was still in its formative stages, and the scientists and the investors were all only too aware that the risks and the dangers were going to increase, which is why they chose me for the job. And I had done everything possible to increase their paranoia and build the most modern and reliable security service imaginable, with its own intelligence operation and a small private army. That was what had consistently saved us. We were faster, smarter, more powerful, and more dangerous than most of those who desired our demise. And also, the fact that I lived this job, that I was ready to die for the preservation of Hephaestus, here and now. I knew that, but Abby apparently didn't. And that was my advantage. Not a major advantage, but an advantage nevertheless. And if I refuse, you shoot me dead?
Not right away,
said the blonde, furrowing her brow.
You do understand that we can torture you for quite a long period of time to break you and get what we want the hard way.
We, not I, we. Sooner or later, language betrays even a professional. All right, let's suppose you did manage to break me, and that the identification process didn't set off an alarm when the system realized that things aren't right with me. Let's suppose that. Although the system will work, of course. But you don't have the time you'd need to torture the information out of me.
Don't overestimate yourself, Superman.
The scorn in Abby's gaze was now mingled with what looked like bloodthirsty anticipation. Not for the first time, I found myself wondering what on earth it was I had seen in her last night. Right now, with that expression of cruelty on her face, she was more repulsive than attractive, like some kind of ravenous fury. In the bar last night, however, she had even been kind of cute. Maybe it was the lighting. Or the scotch. Hard to say for sure. And you keep in mind that in 3 hours I have a flight to Zurich, and if I don't register and take my seat on that flight, my colleagues will sound the alarm. That was true. I was in Thailand for negotiations with one of our suppliers to ensure security on their side and prevent any information leakage. Amusing. Ironic, right? And my movements were tracked by my staff, and the 2 people who were accompanying me would be expecting me in the lobby in an hour. If I didn't show up, the alarm would trigger the safety protocols. The question was whether I was going to survive that hour.
That's more than enough time, Carl. Enough talk.
Abby pulled some kind of gadget out of her pocket, something like a disposable folding telephone. But when she hit the button, it began to unfold in all directions, becoming a full-sized terminal with a keyboard, a large screen, and a biometric scanner. What the? I croaked when she pushed the terminal. It floated towards me through the air, stopping a foot or 2 from my face, its screen now turned towards me. All I could do was stare at Abby in horror, bug-eyed and my mouth opening and shutting like a startled fish. What kind of freaking? What the fucking hell is that? You're not CIA.
No.
And this time the witch granted herself a self-satisfied look. She was enjoying the shocked look on my face.
I'm not CIA, you are quite right.
But, nervous now, gulping down the lump in my throat and shivering slightly, I even shrank away from her a little, losing those hard 1 inches of illusory advantage I had so laboriously built up over the last several minutes. That's incredible. Who are you working for?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you.
My opponent muttered, waving off my question with a dismissive gesture. With that thing? I think I'd believe pretty much anything.
Well, if it helps loosen your tongue, I am from the future.
The future. I repeated the words, the incredulity and skepticism obvious in my expression, and then I looked at the floating terminal again. Hell, you're not joking, are you? What do you mean, from the future? From the future? Like in the Terminator?
Where?
She asked, confused. Forget it, I said, shaking my head. Of all they sent you to destroy our project in the past. Who? Why?
Too many questions, Carl. Who and why aren't your concern. Start establishing access.
Tell me, it's important. Convince me. Maybe you won't need torture or threats. Why, Abby?
You want to know why?
The blonde burst out, and for the first time the gun wavered in her hand.
I'll tell you why. Because in 2107, the energy your project is going to produce will fall into the wrong hands. And that leads to bad things. A lot of bad things. Millions and millions of people are going to die. Because you, idiots, create something worse than weapons. Something you cannot hope to be able to control. Monkeys with hand grenades. Damn it, someone has to fix this.
I suddenly realized that I had frozen as I listened to her passionate rant. My shoulder blade was itching from the tension, unbearably, but I couldn't risk any movements that might provoke Abby.
What?
She asked vehemently, staring at my stunned physiognomy. I don't know. I think I believe you, probably. It's just hard to take this in. Can you understand that? Just like that, in an instant. How can I know you're telling me the truth?
You can't. I don't give a shit if you believe me or not. It's enough I had to let you fuck me. You monster. In any security system, even the most perfect security system, the human factor is always the weakest link. So predictable. So banal. You were so easy to figure out. It's almost funny that the hole in Hephaestus' security system turned out to be the Morin who runs it. A honeypot. It was that primitive.
What could I say to her? That she was right. That I was sorry? That she was so natural, so believable last night, that I never suspected she was faking it. That she obviously liked it. Or that I didn't care whether she liked it or not. That I had fucked her mother the same way, and she had obviously loved it. That it was only another couple of moments before two of my men broke into the room and knocked her brains out. That I didn't care whether she managed to shoot me before that happened or not. That she had screwed up royally if she hadn't reloaded my gun, since I had it loaded with blanks. What if she decided to take a shot and check? Those were live rounds. Why should I help you? You're going to kill me whatever I do, aren't you? I said, looking into her eyes, demanding an answer, especially after everything you've just told me.
No, not necessarily,
she said, carefully monitoring her body language, but a faint tremor in one eyelid and an involuntary contraction of her pupils told me she was lying.
This can still be resolved civilly. I have no wish to kill you. You are not a bad man, Carl. You've just chosen the wrong employers. Give me access and run. I have 50,000 here in this bag. Take it and run. Lay low.
It wasn't much of a chance, but it was a chance. Seriously. Show me the money. She didn't fall for that primitive trick, of course, and the barrel of the gun remained implacably trained upon the center of my chest.
Oh, you'll just have to take my word for that. Now log in.
I'd managed to forget that I was still standing in front of her completely naked, and that I had to reduce the distance between us to make an assault possible. May I lower my hands? Which, I should say, were aching horribly. My shoulders were burning, the muscles beginning to shake in uncontrollable spasms from the pressure. She nodded silently, her eyes focused on my every move. I slowly lowered my hands, shrugging my shoulders, loosening the muscles. Gingerly, I pulled the strange terminal closer and froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "You promised, don't forget," I said, shooting her a warning glance. "Right?"
Yes, yes.
"All right, then," I said, and began to hook into the Hephaestus systems, attempting to avoid violating my own security protocols. And look, seriously, no tricks. To make her point more persuasive, Abby swung the gun slightly down and then up, showing me that I was a big enough target that it would be hard to miss at this range. I get it, I said, raising my palms, and then went back to the identification procedures. I put a finger to the scanner. It read my fingerprint, and then there was a light prick as it took a DNA sample. I tried not to blink as a sensor scanned my retina, and hoped that the lack of sleep and the pressure of the situation wouldn't register and set off an alarm. Just in case your finger gets trigger happy. You need to know that there's a special protocol for this level of access, specifically meant to guard against a situation like this. Whatever you try to do in this system, every action requires multiple factor authorization. Every time, the system generates a new random check. A code sent to my phone, a fingerprint check, a different finger every time, a retina scan, or a DNA check. Or one of 100 test questions. So if you kill me now, access to the Hephaestus system won't be of any use to you.
Funny, you didn't mention that earlier,
she said, her eyes narrowing with hostility. You didn't ask, I said with a crooked grin. In any event, I had a guarantee now that she wouldn't snuff me out before she had finished whatever it was she meant to do. Now we'd have to play it by ear. I did everything she asked and gave myself access to the general project database, passing every security phase without disturbing the control service, always keeping half an eye on the weapon that threatened to create several unwanted orifices in my perfect body.
Slowly push the terminal towards me and take another 2 steps back.
I did that too. When the terminal had drifted off in Abby's direction, I took a step back, almost to the door exiting into the little hallway of my room. To my right was the open bathroom door, one quick step back and a leap to one side. Too long, but the main thing was, what would I do then? It was a dead end. Behind me was the door leading out, but it was shut. 3 steps back, turn around, open the door, and fly into the corridor. Enough time to empty the entire cartridge into my flesh. As I was running these calculations, Abby was typing something into the terminal. Suddenly she cursed, hissing.
Son of a bitch. It does require authorization.
And she pushed the terminal off in my direction.
No sudden movements and no tricks.
She took the gun in both hands now. Of course, it was a big, heavy gun. Keeping it trained on me with her outstretched hand for this long had to be hard. The muzzle was visibly wavering. That was good. If anything happened, there was now a chance she might miss. At least once. I caught the terminal and looked at the screen. She was requesting all the project documentation, test protocols, and implementation procedures. She wasn't playing around. That was a vast amount of data. And the system was requesting another DNA prick and my first pet's name. I had never had a pet, so instead I typed Lola. That was what we called our sergeant in basic training. Not to his face, of course. He wasn't a man you'd joke around with. Son of a bitch. The system clicked quietly, and the green light on the screen confirmed that the test had been passed. I gently pushed the terminal back towards Abby. She began to type something in, opening Windows.
Fuck. It needs to confirm your identity again.
This is why I warned you. Everything's fine. I let it scan my retina again, the left eye this time, and told it what my favorite dessert was. That was an easy one. Steak, of course. While I was confirming that I was me, I had time enough to notice that Abby was trying to send the entire archive to the year 2204. Seriously? Directly from here? Right now? Not downloading it somewhere in our time in order to send it at her leisure to her damn 2204. She was sending it all directly from my hotel room to the future.
You fall asleep or something?
Sorry, just thinking about something. And I hit the confirmation button and got my green light. Everything's okay. The system was asking for my favorite dessert, that's all.
So, is that so hard to remember?
I don't eat dessert. I was trying to remember what I put in back when I was initializing my profile.
And?
Excuse me?
I'm asking you what you put in.
Oh, steak. I like steak. A few times I even ordered a steak for dessert.
You're a psycho,
said Abby, snorting. And that's from a terrorist who came back from the future, fucked me, and the next morning, instead of breakfast, coffee and a teary goodbye, holds me at gunpoint, naked, in my own room, demanding that I break into my own security system. You know, if I believe that, I really am crazy. She ignored my ironic comments without even bothering to deny she was a terrorist. She just went on entering commands into the terminal, which clicked quietly in response, apparently confirming the progress of the transfer. I wondered how broad the band had to be, and how quickly she could pump the information out. Should I tell her now that any information transferred to external channels would be hashed, and that without the key all she would have on her hands was a jumble of incomprehensible symbols? I should probably tell her that, in any event, before she decided she didn't need me anymore. But we weren't there just yet. She had been transferring data for 6 or 7 minutes approximately. Maybe that should have been enough. A faint buzzing in my occipital bone told me everything was as it should be. That almost imperceptible vibration in my skull made me want to sneeze, yawn, and scratch my left ear, all at the same time. With my tongue, I touched 3 molars in order, and then I slowly joined my right thumb with first my middle finger, then my pinky, then my index finger, and then the middle finger again, this time pressing hard. There was a faint click and the world around me stopped. I walked over to Abby and carefully removed her poised finger from the trigger. I took the gun, engaged the safety, and tossed it onto the bed, which still looked like the scene of an epic battle. I had a strong urge to send a fist into the face of my unwanted guest, which was frozen in an expression of utter astonishment. It took a great deal of self-control, but I conquered it. In any security system, even the most perfect security system, the human factor is always the weakest link. So predictable. So banal. I was so easy to figure out. It's almost funny that the hole in Hephaestus' security system turned out to be the moron who runs it. A honeypot. It was that primitive. I shifted Abby's hands behind her back and snapped on a pair of energy cuffs, binding her wrists tightly together so that they were completely immobilized. Her face still bore that same expression of dumb astonishment that had appeared the moment her subjective time had frozen. Perhaps I should have told her yesterday that I had handcuffs. The night might have become even crazier, and I wouldn't have had to go through all this humiliation today. But then I wouldn't have had the opportunity to trace the precise moment and location of the headquarters of the extremist group, supported by several regions that had fallen since Hephaestus was launched. They called themselves the Erinyes, too exalted for a handful of fanatics and mercenaries. But they were extremely dangerous and well organized. The Erinyes had already made several attempts to take Hephaestus by force, but our security service had dealt with them. To avert an attack through the time stream was more difficult. Their goal was not the destruction of Hephaestus, but to obtain control over the project and technology, evidently for the purpose of maintaining and expanding the power of those doomed to lose it. I quickly pulled my underwear and pants on, and only then, with a series of hand gestures, opened a communications window. An imperturbable Rodriguez gazed out at me.
Commander?
You can take her, boys. We know where they are now. I think our people in 349 are already sending a mop-up brigade to those assholes' hideaway in the year 204. And we'll be rid of that irritating threat for good.
Excellent, Commander. We're on our way. Only...
Yes, Rodriguez. He blushed slightly but winked.
You might want to zip your fly.
Hephaestus by Anton Eine.
The Fantastic Worlds of Anton Eine. Like this video and subscribe to the channel